Doing tonight? I'm Peter Mathews. I'm back again to talk about the current issues of the day in the United States, in the world, and also right here in California and in the Long Beach area. Local issues, whatever you'd like to talk about, we're going to be doing that at 7:15. Right now, we're going to focus a bit on the presidential elections and the mechanics of it. I'm going to try to explain how the Electoral College works because most of you probably know that the popular vote in America is not the defining vote. It's not the legally binding vote that actually elects the president. It is important. The popular vote, when people go to the polls on November the 8th, is very important because the popular vote guides the electoral vote. So, for example, California has 55 electoral college votes because they have 55 members of the House and Senate put together. That number is set. The electors in California are actually appointed by each of the parties. So the Republican Party has 55 electors they've already appointed. The Democratic Party has 55 electors they've appointed. The Peace and Freedom Party has 55 electors they've appointed. The Green Party, the party for the Green Party and also the Libertarian Party has 55 electors that they've appointed. And so therefore, whichever candidate of the 4 or 5 or whoever are running actually wins the single largest number of popular votes, it is that candidate's party's electors that go to Sacramento, the state capital, in the second week of December and cast their votes as part of the Electoral College for president. And they can choose any of the candidates that they want, any of the people who are running on the ballot. They don't have to stick to their own party candidate, but most of the time they do stick to their own party's candidate because they are loyal party members. The electors are very loyal party members. They've been around for a long time. They've been appointed by the party leadership of the state to make sure they vote for the party's candidate. So here it is. The other thing we should mention about the Electoral College is this happens throughout the United States in each state. So for example, Vermont has, I believe, 1 member of Congress of the House and 2 senators. So Vermont has only 3 electoral votes. Nevada has, I believe, 4 electoral votes, 2 members of Congress and 2 members in the U.S. Senate. So for that number, they are allocated 4 electoral votes. Therefore, these candidates are really campaigning in the states that have very close popular vote percentages right now. For example, in a state like Florida, where Donald Trump is only, I think, 2.5 points behind Hillary Clinton, it's very close there. So Trump and Clinton are both spending time over there to try to win that state, because whoever wins the plurality of the vote, that is the single largest popular vote percentage in Florida on November the 8th, will win all 55 electoral votes from Florida, which means that if, let's say that Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote in Florida by plurality, which is equal to 50% or less, the single largest percent, 50% or less is a plurality. If she wins, for example, 48%, Donald Trump wins 47%, and the other 2 party candidates, Jill Stein of the Green Party and the other gentleman from Gary Johnson, who's the party candidate for the Libertarian Party, wins the rest of it. Let's say Stein gets 5% and Johnson gets something like 10%. It's already determined that Hillary Clinton won the plurality of votes. She got the single largest percent of votes. She got 48%. The others got less than that. So she wins Florida. Her Democratic electors, I think there are 29 electors from each party in Florida, and those 29 electoral votes will be Democratic electors. And then they will go to Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, on the same day. Throughout the nation, in the state capitals, the electoral votes and electoral electors go to the state capital and cast their ballot for any candidate they want, but they generally cast it for their own party candidate. This system was set up by the founders of the United States of America, the people who wrote the Declaration and who founded the country. And they argued that it's better to let electors choose the president ultimately, because that should be the only binding vote. The common people can guide the electors, but because it was difficult for everyone to come together and vote and count the votes all over the country, it would be better for the electors to travel to their state capitals and cast the ballots once the popular vote was taken. So it's a very interesting concept. I think it's probably time to abolish the Electoral College. In fact, I have written a constitutional amendment that calls for the eliminating of the Electoral College and make it a direct popular vote of the President of the United States. That it's a let the people decide amendment. That's what I called it. Let the people choose amendment. And it's modeled after the 17th Amendment of the Constitution, which is the amendment to give a direct election of U.S. senators. At one time, the state governments used to appoint the U.S. senators to represent the states in Washington. That was until the 17th Amendment was adopted in the early part of the 20th century, in which case it changed so that now the electors who elect the senators from each state are the actual people of the state, the voters of the state. So I modeled the let the people decide amendment for president on that same 17th Amendment, and I had it checked by lawyers. We're ready to go. If any of you want to propose it to members of Congress, this is the only time people talk about it, just before the election. Once the election's over, everyone forgets about the Electoral College and the fact that the American people do not choose the president directly, as they should, in my view, for a democracy. In France, they have a direct election of the president. If there are 5 people running, they have the election on a Sunday, and whichever candidates out of the 5, the top 2 vote getters actually are then advanced 2 weeks later on a Sunday to the voters, who they will choose between the top 2 vote getters. And the final vote on the second Sunday is the vote that determines the president, and the president of France is elected by the people on a majority vote basis. We could have a similar system here if we got rid of the Electoral College. So you have to decide whether you think that's a good idea or not. Some of you believe it's better to let the electors decide, that you don't quite trust the people of America. I do. I think the common people in America are very, very intelligent. They're very reasonable. Once they have all the information, they tend to choose the right position on the issues. So putting my faith and trust in the common people of America, which I'm part of it, I consider myself a common person. I'm not one of the 1% elite who owns millions of dollars worth of property or who has stock on Wall Street. We are working people. Most of Americans are working people who work for a living. They're teachers, they're firefighters, they are bricklayers, they are plumbers, and they are honorable people who build this country and produce the wealth of America. And that's why I think the people should choose the president directly, as we choose our members of Congress. We elect directly the members of Congress, the governors of our states, and the state legislators. There is no electoral college for those elections. Why should there be one for the presidency? Something to think about. So let's continue a bit by talking of going to the presidential election and the updates today of what's going on. As you know, there are at least 4 candidates on the ballot. The 2 party candidates who are called minor party candidates, not very fairly sometimes, but they are parties that are smaller in size. That's the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, and they command less than 10% of the vote. Looks like Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party is getting about 8% of the vote, 9% of the vote in the nationwide. Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party is getting about between 3 and 5% of the vote, and yet they're also on 47 to 50 state ballots. So mathematically, these people could actually win the election if they win enough states in the electoral votes, but they are not given a chance to be in the debates. The major party candidates, such as Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Clinton with the Democratic Party and Trump with the Republican Party, get to be in the debates, and they get to get their ideas out there and to be known by more voters. And most American voters think there are only 2 candidates to choose from. Well, some of you may believe that, and the facts are otherwise. But here it is. Obviously, many people say the chances of the smaller parties winning is next to nothing, but you never know until the votes are cast. So it's up to you to decide how to vote. But I would say to you this, that the electoral votes are what counts. And so therefore, the major party candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, are traveling the country right now campaigning furiously in those border states. They're called not border states, but battleground states, which means the states where the popular vote is very close between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And so whoever wins those states is going to win the election. It's very popular under our system of electoral college that, for example, as happened in the year 2000, Al Gore, the Democrat, won the popular vote. He actually won 500,000 more votes of Americans than George Bush in 2000. In the year 2000, George Bush became our president because he won the electoral vote. And that also had to do with the fact that the Supreme Court stopped the vote count in Florida and awarded those votes, those electoral college votes to Florida, to him, saying that it has to be a one-person, one-vote situation, that Florida counties were counting votes differently based on those chads, hanging chads, dimpled chads, etc. So to make it uniform, the Supreme Court ordered the machine count to stand in Florida, and that gave George Bush Florida by just about a few hundred votes. And so after winning Florida, George Bush won a majority, that's 270 plus electoral votes, and became president while losing the votes of the American people by 500,000 votes to Al Gore. So this is a problem in our system, because to me it doesn't reflect true democracy of letting the people's wishes be known to government and letting the people choose our top government official, the U.S. president. Whereas in the other offices, we let them choose all the other offices with no qualms. So I don't understand why it's so important to let a few appointed members, appointed by elite groups in the parties usually, to make the final choice for us in December after we vote in November. Something to think about. I'll be happy to pull out, dust off the hard copy of my would be the 28th Amendment, actually. Maybe it would become the 29th Amendment if another 28th Amendment passes, dealing with the corporate personhood, which is on the book in the makings right now. This could be the 28th or 29th Amendment to make the American president elected by the people. A nation truly of the people, by the people, and for the people will come into place when we, the people, elect the president directly. What do you think of that? So maybe we should open up the phone lines right now to the public, have a little extra time for the phone calls. And if any of you want to call, please look at the phone number on the screen. It is area code 562-438-0505. 562-438-0505 is the number to call. It's a landline and works out better with a speakerphone. So please go ahead and start calling. Be happy to answer. And meanwhile, we can talk about what's going on in the race right now. As you know, the presidential race between the two major candidates, Clinton and Trump, has degenerated in many ways into a name-calling, sex scandal, a lack of issue-oriented race, where it's very difficult to hear what these candidates are going to do about the major issues such as the economy, jobs that we're lacking in America, the millions of jobs that were lost because of free trade, dealing with issues of whether we should have a TPP, a Trans-Pacific Partnership, or not, which I think it's a terrible idea to have a TPP pass. We need to talk about what are Clinton or Trump going to do if they win. And we know what Jill Stein will do and what Mr. Johnson will do for the Libertarians. We have the idea what their parties stand for. We want to know what the major candidates will do about these major issues. Education. Our young people who are in debt and getting in debt more and more, where we have 40 million American college graduates, the young people, who are in debt to the tune of an average of $30,000 each, for a total of $1.3 trillion student debt. That's got to be addressed. And yet the elections seem to be being diverted to much of this scandal-ridden information that's out there now with the Trump videos and other things, the WikiLeaks emails, of course, which are also important. But on the other hand, we got to also have some time to focus on the main issues of the day. So let's hear from the audience, from the people out there, my friends out in the country and also in our state and the world. If you have time to call from there, we'll welcome any call you come in. So let's go ahead and open it up. Make the phone call to 562-438-0505. 562-438-0505. Okay, what else can we talk about? So much going on. Mainly the issues of the day. What will Congress do? Will the Congress be held by the Republicans or be taken over by the Democrats? Who knows at this point? Right now, the House and Senate are in the hands of the Republican majority in both houses. It's been very tough for President Obama to get some of the policies through that he wanted to get through because of the opposition. For example, with healthcare reform, President Obama wanted to bring in a public option, which would be a nonprofit, government-funded insurance company, sort of like Medicare, nonprofit insurance. That would be an option. The public option would be an option for the consumer who has private insurance to choose. If you didn't like your private insurance, if it was costing too much or not providing enough services, or the deductibles were too high, then you or your employer could switch over to the public system by being able to buy into the public option, which hopefully would have cost less than the private for-profit health insurance companies are charging. Well, the president didn't even get a chance to have his public option included in the healthcare reform, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as you call it, because the corporate Democrats and many corporate Republicans voted it down. They voted down the public option. There were progressive Democrats. There were people who don't take corporate money and run for office, who voted for the public option, but didn't have enough votes to pass. It wasn't even brought up as an option because it was lobbied out of control, out of existence, lobbied out of it by the special interests that run the health insurance companies, the private insurance companies, the private HMOs, the private hospitals, the doctors' association. Some of them were against the public option. But I think it's time now, and most people are going to support a type of public option in the next administration. And we really urge people who become president, whoever it is, to push forward for progressive change, to bring in the platform of the political revolution that Bernie Sanders talked about. The political revolution, which many, many millions voted for in the primaries when they voted for Bernie Sanders, was adopted by the Democratic Party, much of it, not all of it, and Hillary Clinton agreed to adopt it. Now let's see if Hillary Clinton, if she becomes president, will actually carry through and push through these progressive issues. Public option, universal single-payer healthcare system like Canada's, as our Medicare system is, which is non-profit, which has no co-payments, no deductibles, and covers people and pays the doctors and nurses directly when they charge the public insurance companies. It saves money. It only costs 2/3 as much to run a single-payer system as Canada does. 2/3 the cost per person as we pay here to cover people or to not cover everyone with a private system. That's semi-private because we do have Medicare and Medi-Cal. So we have a hybrid system that doesn't work too well. It's very expensive, and yet we are not even looking at the possibility of a public option or a single-payer system. I want the new president, if he or she gets into power, to really push this single-payer healthcare system and then to focus a lot on our economy and our jobs. Why not bring in a program as President Roosevelt did back in the 1930s to create public works, a government-run system of agencies such as the Works Progress Administration back in the 30s, the Public Works Administration, the Federal Actors Workshop, all kinds of programs that the government hired people in America to perform plays in the case of actors around the country and draw a federal paycheck, to have engineers rebuild our roads and bridges with the WPA, and workers and construction workers build those types of things and tributes to buildings, and artists paint murals. We had so many programs that worked in the 1930s and 40s under President Roosevelt's New Deal that really got the country out of the Depression. It created stimulus because when people had money in their hands, when they were paid even by the government to do jobs, they could go out and demand products, go to small business and pick up a cup of coffee from a small business coffee shop, go out and have breakfast at a restaurant with their family and spend the money there. And that stimulated the economy and created more small business demand, and the president provided those kinds of opportunities. I think it's time we have a green, high-tech New Deal for the 21st century. And I believe we could do that, but we're going to have to push. The American people are going to have to push the new president and the Congress to push the country in that direction. Because if we don't, many of the corporate elites will continue funding the campaigns of all these members of Congress. Already they fund the campaigns of both major candidates, and they're going to want something in return, and which means no public option, which means no tuition-free college. That's all something that we need to have. Tuition-free college, as most of the modern countries do in the world. Germany, France, Denmark, they all have tuition-free college, tuition-free university. We had it in California back in the 60s to the 80s. We need to have that again. But the new president will not push for that unless she or he has the demand from the American people. Otherwise, it will not happen. So I'm waiting for your phone calls, or I'll keep rambling on here. How about that? I can certainly talk more about these things. Much better for me to hear from you and have your input and your questions. So would you please pick up the phone and dial 562-438-0505. Perhaps the phone's not working. It's a new system that we set up. Let's see. Is anyone calling in? Let me call my assistant Brett to come over here and take a look at this. Brett?
Yeah.
Can you see if the phone is connected, please? And set up properly? Oh, here comes the phone call. It is connected. Someone is calling in. Okay, let's see who this could be. Yes, hello, you're on the phone line. How's everyone doing? Who's out there?
Yes, I'm calling about the show.
Okay. And what's your name? What's your name, please?
My name is Frank.
Oh, Frank, how you doing?
All right. And hang on a second.
Do you have a question for the show and also for the people out there who are listening? A question about...
Yeah, so here's the question. How do we make sure that Hillary Clinton carries out her promises after she gets elected?
Excellent question. The question was, how do we make sure that Hillary Clinton, if she gets elected, will carry out her promises? The platform the Democratic Party adopted, a large part of it which came from Bernie Sanders' platform, such as paying for education, tuition free for those families whose children who make less than $125,000 a year. She's guaranteed for their children to be able to go to college free. How will we make sure she delivers on that? How will we make sure that she delivers on the kind of tax policy that will close the corporate loopholes and put a higher tax on super wealthy incomes and bring the money in for public works and building infrastructure, those kinds of things? Well, here's how we do it, Frank. The only way to do it is we have to organize. The people of America have to organize in our precincts, in our districts, congressional districts, statewide, and make phone calls to the President Clinton's White House if she's there as president. If it's Donald Trump, we've got to keep the pressure on him and make the calls, go out and demonstrate peacefully, agitate, educate, and say, here are the plans that you guys promised to bring our jobs back, Mr. Trump. You promised that. Where are our jobs now? Why is there so much unemployment? Ms. Clinton, you promised to bring in tuition-free education. Why haven't you got there yet? So now here's the thing. We know how Congress works. The U.S. government works that the president proposes and Congress has to dispose or carry it out and pass the law. The president can ask Congress to pass a bill. Only a member of Congress can introduce a bill that would bring in tuition-free education or bring in more jobs through public works or small business entrepreneurship. Only Congress can introduce the bill. A member of Congress can introduce the bill. It's got to go through both houses, passed by a simple majority vote. Then it goes to the president's desk in the identical same form. The president can sign it, make it a law if it passes. If the president vetoes it, it goes back for a 2/3 override. This is, you know, the process. Most Americans learn this in cartoons, how a bill becomes law. Schoolhouse Rock, I think it was. Here it is. You learn it in high school. That's what you got to do. What's the problem, Frank? How are we going to get that done? You tell us. Yeah.
Look at Obama with the House and the Senate being in the hands of the Republicans. He hasn't been able to do anything. And if that's the same case with Hillary, she's not going to be able to do anything and just wasted time and energy.
Very good point. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. So that's what my concern is.
Right.
I think that people need to go out and vote for and work hard to elect Democratic congressmen and senators.
Okay.
As well.
So what you're saying is, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, she won't even be able to carry out these promises that she made, even if some of them are progressive. She cannot do it because unless Congress goes along with her and votes in those laws that she proposes, it won't happen. Am I right?
Yeah.
So you want to see a Democratic Congress? Well, what do you want, a Congress that's dominated by corporate Democrats funded by big lobbyists from Wall Street? Or do you want a Congress of grassroots people, a brand new Congress of people who will not accept corporate money and get elected and be able to help Hillary Clinton implement, if she's the president, implement Bernie Sanders' program, which was the progressive program on the Democratic side? So what type of Congress do you want, Frank? Just any Democratic Congress, or do you want a non-corporate bought Congress?
I would rather
Okay.
that the Congress that people voted, and then they're going to carry out the people's wishes, and not just, I know that corporate Democrats, they'll use them as well. They're no different than having Republican congressmen.
Yeah, because most of the Republicans, almost all of them, accept corporate money. They accept lobbyist money. They love it. They say, we are for business. We'll take the business person's money. We'll then serve them and do what they have to, because the Republicans believe if business does well, all of America will do well. They say business is the engine that drives the train. We have to keep fueling the engine. They say business will trickle down their profits to the rest of us. Well, trickle down hasn't happened before, and it certainly won't happen again, but they believe it anyway. On the other hand, the Democrats are a party that's split between those who are for corporations, those who take the most of the corporate money and then serve the corporations 80% of the time and don't give the American people what they need, and other Democrats who are really loyal to the American people. Democrats such as Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, Congresswoman Kaptur, person like Bernie Sanders, who was in office as independent, who's non-corporate, didn't take money from corporations or lobbyists when he ran all these years and served in the Senate and the House. We have Democrats like Dennis Kucinich, who was in the Congress and the House for many, many decades from Ohio, who was a non-corporate Democrat, who introduced single payer. So you're right. The problem is with the people, how people get elected to office in America, especially to Congress, state government, and state governorships. These are mostly dominated by big money donors, and that is the problem with our elections. We need to move to a public finance system of elections as they have in Maine and Arizona, other states, a voluntary public financing of elections called clean money elections. But meanwhile, Frank, you are right. People have to go out and vote this November to elect the right people and non-corporate candidates for office, non-lobbyist dominated candidates for office. To do that, we've got to inform everyone. So that's what this show is about. We've got to get people to talk to each other on Facebook, on the internet, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you can get the word out. In your grocery store line, talk to people about what's going on in America. Tell them how we have almost a 15% or so poverty rate in this country. How we have children going to bed hungry. 1/5 of our children go to bed hungry sometime during the month in America, which is a rich country with lots of food to feed everyone. You let them know about our defense budget that's so overspent in terms of money. $610 billion, which is equal to all the next 7 countries put together. We got to start educating each other in a mass way and getting people to vote in these polls and show how things can be turned around, that if and when the people lead, the leaders will follow. Mahatma Gandhi said, if the people lead, the leaders will follow. And every time America has made major changes, such as the civil rights movement, such as the women's equality movement, such as the labor union movement, the environmental movement, the LGBT movement for equality, the people with disabilities movement, all of these folks who are good people who believe in social justice and put their lives on the line and mostly non-violently demonstrated and protested and agitated and educated and got the Congress people to vote the right way. That has happened only because from the ground up, the American people organized and made the demands. Just as Frederick Douglass, the great American abolitionist who was the congressional record leader, he was actually appointed by Congress to be a congressional journalist, the top one. Abolitionist, a former slave, Frederick Douglass once said that power concedes nothing without a demand. Power concedes nothing without a demand. So we've got to demand that. We've got to vote, Frank. We've got to get people out to vote. So who else is out there to make a phone call? Thank you so much. How about we hang up, Frank? Is that okay? And see if someone else is calling in?
No, that's about it, yeah.
Any other point you want to make, Frank?
Huh?
Is there any other point that you would like to make?
No, not tonight.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. So anyone else who'd like to call in, please do. We've got another
4 minutes.
4 minutes. 4 minutes left to a phone call. At least one or two more phone calls we could take. So please pick up your phone and dial area code 562-438-0505. 562-438-0505. Hope to hear from you. Meanwhile, what do you folks think about getting this campaign, this presidential campaign, back on track to where we can talk about some really substantive issues of economics, of jobs, of global warming, of these things that are facing humankind? And of course, we have to condemn the kinds of information we've gotten from the video that was aired on Saturday about Donald Trump's talk. It was actually a taped video of his speech, of his talking to Access Hollywood co-host. Some very salacious remarks about women and sexist remarks about what he would do with them and what he does with them and what he wants to do with them. And all of this stuff, it reflects a type of disrespect for women, and that has to be called. He has to be called on that. At the same time, let us start focusing now on other issues as well. Don't just have only that one issue we're focusing on. We've got to focus on the issues of what these candidates are going to do to bring America out of our morass, of the ditch that we're in, of this tremendous system of being essentially our middle class being dismantled, shrinking by 8 to 10% in the last few years, the middle class, which means if you don't have a middle class, you cannot have a democracy or a country that's viable. This is real serious stuff. I mean, this is something that we've got to tackle head on right away. And whoever gets elected, we need to get a Congress in there that will actually carry out and respond to the American people. And the members of Congress have to also lead the direction of the political revolution towards social justice, social, economic, and environmental justice. It is a time that we put America back on track again. This is a great country, land of immigrants, and we know that also Native people, the Native Americans, have to be respected. The Native people who were here before the immigrants came and before immigrants brought slaves with them to settle the land here. There were Native people. One of the most prominent speaker who said something so important that we cannot forget, Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle once said that every decision we make in our everyday lives and in our political lives, the decisions for the community, for the nation, have to be decisions that consider the next 7 generations, or how our decision will impact the next 7 generations, not just the next 1 generation. So we need to do that. We need to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, the future generations of our young people, as the Constitution requires. Thank you so much, folks. I'll say good night for now, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 7:30 next Monday, to pick up where we left. Take care. Peter Mathews. Goodbye.